Welcome. We are the Ministry of the Real Truth, and today we are bringing you the Asatir microform version of the Samaritan Book of the Secrets of Moses by Moses Gesner, 1856 to 1939. Freely available in public domain, public access. The Asatir, the Samaritan Book of the Secrets of Moses, together with the Pentateuch or Samaritan commentary and the Samaritan story of the death of Moses, published for the first time with introduction, translation and notes by Moses Gesner, PhD. London, published by the Royal Asiatic Society in 1927. So it's quite an old book. Preface. A preface to a little book with a voluminous introduction of some hundreds of pages seems a superfluous luxury. The author believed, however, that such an introduction is intended to give to a superficial reader a brief indication of what he may expect to find in the book. The scholar requires none of it. In order, therefore, to satisfy such a reader, the author would tell him briefly that he was publishing here for the first time a Samaritan collection of biblical legends, a parallel to the Jewish Midrash and to the pseudepigraphic literature. He claimed for the Secrets of Moses that it is the oldest book in existence of this kind of literature, and the author put the date of its compilation to be about the middle or end of the 3rd century BCE. In the introduction, the reader will see how the author had reached a conclusion as startling to him as probably it will be to him who will take this book for the first time into his hands, or follow along in this video as you read it. It was very slow and uphill work, but the author had to cover a wide field, leaving no document unexamined, which might help to throw light on the date and origin of this book. The author had searched through the entire pseudepigraphic literature in whatever language it may have been preserved, and he worked his way up to the Hellenistic literature, to the Sibylline oracles and Eupolemos. Josephus attracted him quite especially, and the author believed that he had been able to put a new complexion on the character and sources of his antiquities. The Palestinian Targum had come under minute examination, and in connection with it all the Jewish Midrashim. The Sibylline oracles have been traced down to the latest development in the Tibetan, and the medieval oracles down to Matthew of Paris, and even to Slavonic and Romanian texts. In his re-examination, the author's re-examination of the pseudepigraphic literature, he arrived at conclusions which differ widely from those accepted today. He had drawn attention to affinities with Mandaean traditions, and he had endeavoured to give as little a translation as was possible of a text so old and unfortunately so corrupt that even the joint wisdom of the Samaritans of today has been unable to solve many of the problems raised by it. A commentary prepared by them has also been added, which exemplifies the exact state of scholarship among the Samaritans of the last few centuries. Brief, but the author believes sufficiently ample reference to the entire literature has been given in footnotes, and a chapter of the book has been given in transliteration, showing the pronunciation by the Samaritans of the old text. The author could faithfully say that he had spared no effort in trying to elucidate a book which, by its character, claims special attention from more than one point of view. The parallelism between Jews and Samaritans and all their mental activity, to which the author has referred in his Schweik lectures, must be some other lectures that he did prior, manifests itself here again. A Midrashic interpretation of the middle of the 3rd century points to a fixed text of the Pentateuch, already considered as holy and immutable in word and letter. The time is not yet ripe to inquire into the primary source of these biblical legends. The author, having endeavoured, however, believed for the first time that he would lift some of them out of the narrow confines of Palestine, and to join them to the wider circles of world legends, and a new view had been advanced by the author, among others, of the origin of the Antichrist legion. It must be left to others to continue this comparative study and to investigate the closer relations between them and the mutual influences which they may have exercised upon one another. It would be ungrateful on the author's part were he not to mention, in the first place, the assistance which the Samaritans tried to give him, especially the late high priest Jacob, the son of Aaron, and his son Abhazda, they're probably long gone now, and to a large extent Abisha, the son of Pinehas. From time to time, one friend or another has rendered him valuable help, the author, but a special debt of gratitude was owed to Mr. B. Bamberger, who, with sincere devotion and scholarly acumen, assisted him in the final process of shaping the book and reading the proofs while it was passing through the press. And last but not least, he shows his appreciation for the generosity of the Royal Asiatic Society, which had enabled him to publish the most ancient monument so miraculously preserved of the Samaritan literature, truly a brand plucked out of the fire. M. Gaster, London 193. Made at Vale, West 9, June 16th, 1927. Table of contents. Character and title of the book. The best way to describe the Asatir is to call it a Midrash, Agadah, or legendary supplement to the Pentateuch. Unlike other apocrypha, with which it has much in common, the author does not attempt to retell anew the sacred history and to present it in a specific form and with a deliberate tendency. He is content to leave the sacred scriptures as it stands without meddling with its narrative and without trying to readjust the events recounted therein, within the book, according to a certain preconceived system, either legal or astronomical. The author took for granted the Samaritan tradition as he knew it, and did not waste his ingenuity to prove its truth. The following table of contents will show the exact character of the book. And it's shown below. The book is called by the Samaritans the Asatir, or as it should have been, Asatir. The author had translated this title, The Secret of Moses, thus translating the Samaritan word Asatir, so pronounced by the Samaritans, in order to distinguish it at once from the other books ascribed to Moses, such as the Apocalypse or the Assumption of Moses. The Samaritans themselves no longer understand the title and were unable to enlighten the author, in spite of frequent questioning, but they at the same time emphatically repudiate the notion that the title may be of Arabic origin. They totally said, no, it's not true. They refuted it. The word is one which has not been taken by them into their language. It occurs neither in their liturgical poems nor in any other book with which the author was acquainted, although they are quite familiar with the Hebrew parallel form, and has that in Hebrew, from the passage in the Bible, Deuteronomy 31:18, to which they attach overwhelming importance. The fulfillment of the threat expressed by that sentence in the Bible marks, according to them, the starting point of the Fanuta, the hiding of God's presence. The Hebrew word has not been retained in its Hebrew form, even in the Samaritan Targum to that passage. But in the case of the present book, this book, they have evidently retained the very old name, the true meaning of which they have since forgotten. It is unquestionably the primitive Hebrew name for that literature, which has since become known under the two Greek names of Apocryphon and Apocalypse, both meaning something hidden or something revealed in a secret form. A narrower meaning has been attached to the word Apocryphon, inasmuch as it has been given to a set of books not received in what is called the canon of the Jewish Bible. Without entering upon any discussion as to the meaning of the canon, of the Jewish Bible, whatever may be understood by it. It is clear that it cannot be applied to any Samaritan writing, since the Samaritans have only the Pentateuch, and outside this the book of Joshua and some fragments of Judges and Samuel. These latter are treated by them as profane history. The use of the title Apocryphon, therefore, would have been misleading, and as for Apocalypse, it could only be applied to the 2 last chapters, which deal with prophecies connected with the very last hours of Moses upon earth. The author has, therefore, as mentioned before, chosen the title The Secret of Moses in preference to any other, for it agrees much more closely with the character of this book. Moreover, Secreta Moisi, or Secrets of Moses, appears as a title in one of the oldest lists of books excluded from the canon by the Church. See Charles, The Assumption of Moses, London, 1897, page 15. It is not unimportant to mention that in the Hebrew literature a book has been preserved, to which reference will be made later on page 52, under the title of the Secret or Mysteries of Rabbi Simeon ben Yochai. It is a real apocalypse and contains prophecies concerning the end of time and various events connected with therewith. The Hebrew name of it is Nistarot, which is precisely of the same root as the Samaritan form of Asatir. From the contents and from the facts that it is ascribed to Moses, it's ascribed to him. It's traditional for Jews to put a name to a scroll or to a book. So they attributed that to Moses, that he wrote it, when they admit he actually probably didn't. Yeah, following the tradition. The book might also be described as pseudepigraphic, like someone else could have written it. They can't pinpoint who the author was, but they can get a near exact date of when it was written. True, it is nowhere in the text expressly stated that Moses wrote it, but its authorship is assumed by the title and by the tradition. There you go. The tradition is still alive among the Samaritans. They have the same sort of tradition as the Jews had, by putting a title to a scroll or a book. Although in quoting the book, as will be seen later on page 137-140, the various Samaritan writers quote only the master of the Asatir, or the author of the Asatir, al-Asāṭīr. They leave it undecided as to whether Moses actually wrote it, or whether it is a tradition handed down from Moses. Thus the Asatir belonged to the large number of pseudepigraphic writings ascribed to Moses. It differs completely, however, from the others, inasmuch as it is the only one that starts from Adam and finishes with the death of Moses. It thus covers the whole of the Pentateuch. The Book of Jubilees carries its story from creation to the Exodus. The so-called Apocalypse of Moses is in reality an Adam book. It contains only the story of the going out of paradise by Adam and Eve, the various incidents connected with the first man, and closes with the death of Adam and Eve. Well, in the Aramaic Brita, he's not actually the first human being. It's pre-Adamic man. Cro-Magnon, etc., etc. Or, as the translators put it, perhaps erroneously, Neanderthal man. Another is the Assumptio, or rather the Testament of Moses, which is limited exclusively to the last days of Moses and closes with a prophecy. The reason why an Adam book should have been called the Apocalypse of Moses has hitherto remained obscure, as no reference to Moses is found in any of the texts, neither in the Greek, Latin, Slavonic, Arabic, nor Ethiopian, nor even in the Syriac Cave of Treasures. That's another pseudepigraphic book, which already goes beyond the more limited scope of the others. In the light of the Asatir, this difficulty is now removed, since it explains the reason for that title, as the text here begins with the history of Adam and Eve and finishes with the death of Moses. The Apocalypse may therefore have originally belonged to a similar full compilation. In fact, the Apocalypse agrees in the main with the first chapters of our book ascribed to Moses. Compare page 115. From this, the Apocalypse has then been detached, but retained in the old title of the whole book. The Asatir then is accepted by the Samaritans as a book of Moses. Although those who made copies for the author from the older original manuscripts differ among themselves in the wording of the title, still they are unanimous in ascribing it to our master Moses. So it appears also in the Arabic paraphrase and in the Ptron, commentary. Moreover, to the questions which the author put to the Samaritans, he received the unequivocal reply that of course the book was written by Moses. Of course the book was written by Moses. And although it did not enjoy the same authority as the law, the Torah, nonetheless the facts which were related in the book were all true and reliable. The old tradition has thus been preserved, unaltered down to our very days. One must realize that the name of an author was not considered to be one of such a determining value as it is in modern times. Hence the reason why the same book was at one time ascribed to one author and at other times to another author. Take for example the very same apocalypse being ascribed in turns to St. Paul, St. Peter or the Lady Mary. Most of the apocryphal writings are practically anonymous, quite indifferent to the names which were from time to time attached to them. They are popular literature in the widest sense of the word and have been treated as such. Originally, neither the Jews nor the Samaritans would have inquired too closely about the authenticity of such legendary writings ascribed to the one or the other of the patriarchs. So little importance was attached originally to the name of the author that those older writings which were circulating under various names were afterwards gathered under one heading. For example, the Enoch books or the Adam books or the Moses book. As Moses had written the law, why should he not have added another book of explanatory tales which completed his narrative and did not affect the law or the Torah? The Asatir keeps free of every legal prescription. The people, no doubt, believe that Moses did not limit his work to the Pentateuch. The Jewish tradition goes further. The whole oral law is said to have been developed by Moses, in addition to the written, and not a few very ancient legal prescriptions are described distinctly as laws. Halacha, given by Moses from the time of Sinai. In the Bible itself, a psalm is indeed ascribed to Moses. Amongst the oldest prayers, the Samaritans have one ascribed to Moses and also one to Joshua, the former, save for a few words consisting of verses from the Pentateuch. No wonder that to them many a legend connected with the narrative of the Pentateuch should also have been the work of Moses. Thus we have in our Asatir book a genuinely believed by the Samaritans to be a work of Moses, the only man acknowledged capable of writing such a book and foretelling the future. That the book was held in very high esteem by the Samaritans and treated almost as a sacred book is proven by the fact that it has exercised great influence on Samaritan literature, as will be shown later on page 134, as well as by yet another fact which appears to be very simple and yet it is one of great significance. Anyone acquainted with Samaritan manuscripts will notice that no profane book, whatever its character may be, has ever been written on parchment. This material has been reserved for books of a sacred or semi-sacred character. It is only the law, some ancient prayer book, or some very old phylacteries which were invested with a special character of sanctity that have been written on parchment and no other work. The author had not found even a copy of Markar's great poems on that parchment. The only exception is the Asatir, and a copy which is still preserved among the Samaritans of Nablus. From the end of the 15th century they have ceased using parchment because by that time the last remnant of the ashes of the red heifer prepared a few centuries previously had come to an end. They were therefore no longer in the state of Levitical purity to handle and to prepare skins for sacred use. The fact that the old copy of the Asatir was written on parchment shows that the reverence with which this book was treated by the Samaritans and the belief that it was indeed a work of Moses. Ever since the author discovered the book for the very first time among the Samaritans in May 1907, he had endeavoured to trace its origin and to compare it with the existent apocryphal and pseudepigraphic literature. There were apparently so many common traits that the author felt sure by means of such comparison to be able to establish its true character and the approximate date of its composition. And he speaks more on that. And he goes on about the stream of the literary tradition to its remote sources through the Palestinian Targum, Josephus, until it reached the Sibylline oracles and the fragments of the Hellenistic literature preserved by Eusebius. There seems to be nothing of high antiquity which could not be brought into some relation with the one or the other section of the Asatir, and in the following pages the author gives the result of that slow and patient investigation which had taken him so many years to complete. The first works to be examined is the Sibylline Oracles. Sibyl of Tabor, Josephus, the Palestinian Targum, follow in the order of their approximation to the Asatir, and then the apocryphal and pseudepigraphic literature fall into their proper place in relation to the Asatir. Sibylline Oracle, Polymos and other Hellenistic writers, and he talks about that. Among the prominent episodes in the Asatir are the history of the flood, chapter 4, the division of the earth by Noah among his 3 sons, the covenant of peace which he makes with them, the rebellion of Nimrod meaning one who opposed God, who rebelled against God, who is represented as a giant and who causes the Tower of Babylon to be built for chapter 4, 31-32. Which is afterwards destroyed by winds and storm, his oppression of the other nations, the wars which are initiated by him against 7 nations, and their destruction, the rise of Egypt to be the first kingdom after their dispersion, immediately after which there is added a peculiar history of Nimrod, chapter 5, 11, 12. He, all the time being the hero of this tale, is frightened by a sign which is explained by the soothsayers, that a child will be born to Arpachshad, son of Shem, who will destroy him and his kingdom. Was that Eber? Or Heber? I'm not sure on that one. He thereupon separates the men from their wives, but his stratagem does not succeed, and Abraham is born, who later on defies his authority, Nimrod's authority, and is therefore cast into the fire and saved by God. This abstract may suffice now for our immediate purpose. In the course of this investigation, further variants and parallels from the Samaritan literature will be adduced, which complete the tale such as we find it in the text before us, which unfortunately seems to be corrupt and incomplete. But for all this tale, there are only very slender allusions in the Bible, which have afterwards been worked up until they have assumed this more elaborate form. 2 points may however be noted, for they may be helpful in elucidating the problems before us. Nimrod is particularly made contemporary with Abraham, though in fact only 3 generations separate Nimrod from Noah. This is a serious anachronism, and yet no notice is taken of it. Further, the portion which Noah gives to Shem is in the land of Africa, i.e. Phrygia, chapter 4:30. We now turn to the Sibylline Oracles. Book 3 of the Sibylline Oracles is universally acknowledged as the oldest in the collection which has been preserved, and is of undoubted Jewish origin. Scholars have been able to establish the fact that the book is of a composite character, some parts being older and other parts probably of a much later date. But even the latest parts are not later than the middle of the 2nd century BC, the time of Ptolemaios 7 Hiscon. Is he like the leader of the Hyksos? Don't know. Could be. In its present state, it is composed of many fragments which have been joined together and always very happily, and the book has suffered many interpolations and changes. Moreover, it must be remembered that none of the manuscripts of the Sibylline Oracles hitherto known is older than the 13th or 14th century. No wonder, therefore, as the incoherent character of some parts of its contents. But on one point all are agreed that the book can be safely divided into 3 sections, of which the first from line 97 to line 170 or thereabouts is unquestionably the oldest oracle. The fathers of the church, especially Lactantius and Eusebius, the later quoting Polyhistor, all show more or less complete knowledge of the first lines of this section. Of real importance for our present investigation is the first section from lines 97 to 121 and 154 to 170, reserving a separate treatment later on for lines 122 to 153. The former deals with the building of the tower, the fight of the Titans, and the establishment of the first kingdoms. Titans in the Aramaic is like gigantic creatures, right? Like dinosaurs. The destruction of the giants, the history of Egypt, the rise of several kingdoms, and an abrupt reference to Solomon. This is that special section which has been quoted variously in olden times as belonging to the Erythraean Sibyl, the Chaldean, or the Hebrew Sibyl. We are therefore justified in subjecting that section to a new examination, especially as its Jewish origin cannot be doubted, particularly since it seems also to have enjoyed a very wide reputation as such. For the story of the Tower of Babel and the subsequent fight is not only told by the Sibyl, but we find parallel legends in other writers not of Jewish origin. It is therefore obviously a legend which from the time of the Sibyl had become widely known and had been appropriated by writers in various countries and modified in such manner as to suit local history. This is a process generally followed by all historians of olden times and greatly favoured by the writers of the Hellenistic period, or the Greek period. It seems, however, that the scholars, while admitting interpolation and amplification in the rest of the book and in the other oracles, have not recognised that we also have here two distinct narratives which have been joined together in a somewhat synchronistic manner. It will therefore be best for the time being to eliminate lines 122 to 153 and to join lines 121 to 154 and to treat this as an undivided whole. The flow of the narrative is not in the slightest way interrupted, and in fact line 154 is a repetition of line 121. And he continues. It came about that the Sibyl should have woven into a poem the tale of the giants just in connection with the Tower of Babel, and on the other, why the Sibyl should have treated the War of Nations and the origin of the Egyptian kingdom to the same period, as footnote below that. The literature which has been gathered around this portion is so vast that it must suffice, or must be enough, to refer to the principal writers where the bibliographies complete one another. Stephen Schmidt in Christ Geschichte der Greeks, it's German literature, volume 1, German sucks, page 609, F612, F, etc., etc. The story of the Tower of Babel and its destruction by the wind sent by God or by the gods is mentioned with slight variations by Alexander Polyhistor, Josephus Abydos, and the Armenian chronicler Moses of Corina. In the Hellenistic writings collected by Eusebius in his Praeparatio Evangelica? Is that like preparatory or something? Not really sure. Preparation or something like that. Pre-prepared or something, not really sure. However, there are only very few in which the story of the fight of the giants is given with as many details as in the Sibyl. The names of the gods against who Titan fights are also changed from chronicler to chronicler. Oh, okay, so like you had that movie, The Clash of the Titans or whatever, legend about the Titans or something. That's probably what this is talking about. But a fight between them and giants or something like that, along those lines. Neither do we find in all these any complete coincidence with the Sibyl, nor any reference to the beginning of the kingdom of Egypt. It would be easy to multiply the parallels to the story which, however, as cannot be denied, rests here ultimately on the biblical narrative. Another version has been ascribed to Berosus. It was a king of Egypt, the Pharaoh of Egypt. I think Tacitus talks about him, but probably without any reason. So he might have been the one that kicked out the Hebrews, Israelites, because their pigs had leprosy, and supposedly these Hebrews, as stated by the Tacitus, from the Egyptians, they had buboes in their testicles, a disease in their testicles. Maybe it's a different name though. It sounds similar. It's not likely. Yeah, the other one might have been Berosus, not Berosus. It's not likely that Berosus, who wished to glorify Babylon and its past, would insert into his narrative a tale so destructive and humiliating as that of the rebellious builders of the tower, which was destroyed by the wrath of God, or the anger of God. As he is more or less contemporary with Euhemeros, and the latter quotes the Sibyl, the version ascribed to Berosus is probably also of the later date, and wrongly ascribed to him. The Bible is the starting point, but we shall have to seek in writings which rest upon it for the primary source of this legend and the form in which it now appears, as well as for the reasons why the giants fight should be introduced here. A glance at the Asatir may now fully solve the problem. The author points to the fact that, in its essence, you have to deal here with the Nimrod legend. A certain Mar Epas Katina, reputed author of the Syriac Armenian chronicle used by Moses of Corinna, has also a full reference to the building of the tower by the giants and its destruction and subsequent confusion. And here's a footnote indication, and there's a footnote here. The name of Mar Epas Katina as an author does not occur in a Balmastark in his Syriac literature, born 1922. And talks about Nimrod to help assist solving the problem as to which the symbol has drawn information, as well as the sequence of events. For if we followed also the identification of older writings, we see in this the development of a legend whose central figure is Nimrod. For as indicated above or prior, you have the unquestionably the story of Nimrod, which has been greatly developed into which many incidents have been added, not found directly in the Bible, but probably deduced from it by that specific Midrashic exegesis, which interprets names and words in a manner of its own. It is well known that one single word of the Bible is often sufficient to become the starting point for a whole series of legends. This Midrashic exegesis connects the names of Nimrod with the word Marad, to rebel, and this was sufficient to spin it out into a long story of Nimrod, who was rebellious against God. The fact that he is mentioned as king of Babylon is, for the author of the legend, sufficient proof that he must have usurped his power, especially when taken in connection with the history of Noah and his 3 sons. He must have over-exemplified his power, went beyond his powers. Of these, Shem is the one appointed king by Noah, and yet we find Nimrod as the first king. Here is again sufficient reason for legendary activity to develop Nimrod's kinship into usurpation or fight. Moses of Corinne does not fail to recognize that the 3 sons between whom the power is divided, i.e. Zeraunan, Titan and Japhetos, are none other than Shem, Ham and Japhet. Langlois 259. The fact that Nimrod is mentioned as Gabor gives him preeminence in the eyes of the maker of legends. Why should he be called Gabor, and what is the real meaning of that word? In the LXX Septuagint to Genesis 17:4, 10:8-9, we already find the Midrashic interpretation. The word is therefore translated as giant. According to Samaritan tradition, Gabor is also the word used regularly for giant. This word is at once connected with the Gaborium in Genesis 6:4, a further corroboration for that interpretation of the word Gabor as meaning giant, inasmuch as the Gaborium here mentioned are also translated giants, as well as is the word Nephilim, Nephilim in the same verse, and so forth. Eupolemus, in his history of the Jews in Assyria, says that the city of Babylon was first built by those that escaped from the deluge, or great flood, and that these were giants. Yeah, apparently there's certain giants that are like 400 feet tall, so that's how they survived. And in the Quran, they were about 100 feet, something like the Dad or something, and they survived as well because their heads were above water. These giants dwelt in the tower about which we have spoken, but this having fallen by the act of God, the giants were dispersed over the whole earth. And he says that in that 10th generation, in the city of Babylon, Kamarina, i.e. furnace, pseudo-upalemos, knows therefore the interpretation of the Hebrew word as furnace, as being the starting point of the legion of Abraham, and furnace that would rather be the Chaldean, wouldn't it? Because Hebrew was a movement of people, not actually a language, as far as the Brita in the Aramaic, Genesis in English, when translated, proves. They were a movement of people. Pascal was said to be the father of the those who made children of passage. He was the forefather of the children of passage, or the father of the children of passage, those who crossed over, made a journey to another land. Eber, one of his sons, born, was born to him, and then these people were called Awer, A-W-E-R, in the ancient Aramaic, meaning people who crossed over, made a passage, made a journey, i.e. to the land of Canaan. So it doesn't appear to actually be a language, but a movement of people. And it becomes a language later on because of the Canaanite Ugaritic, and possibly the Hebrew is just a cover, a modern day cover for that fact. Camarina, i.e. furnace, pseudo-upalemos, knows therefore the interpretation of the Hebrew word as furnace, thus being the starting point of the legion of Abraham and the furnace. At the same time, he goes on to say that is the name of the town. True syncretism. Again, there's plenty more information here on that, about Nimrod, etc., and the giants, the Tower of Babel. Because we just saw Mohammedan. And he says Jewish Arabic Legion of Abraham among the fragments of the Geniza. Once in his possession, he transferred to the British Museum. There the story is put in the mouth of Kabul Habar, the well-known companion of Muhammad. He was of Jewish origin and is believed to be the author of many of the biblical legends alluded to in the Quran and found afterwards in various Mohammedan commentaries or Islamic commentaries. Unfortunately, the beginning is missing in the manuscript, but what is left is quite sufficient to prove the antiquity of the story. It begins with the wizards and soothsayers warning Nimrod against the descendants of Pakshad, i.e. Eber, and up to Abraham. On their advice, he builds an immense prison where he keeps all the women of Apakshad's family, Thus far, it is in agreement with the Asatir, but unlike it, they are not imprisoned in order to prevent pregnancy, but to await the time of their child's birth. Every male child is then torn to pieces. The mother of Abraham is able to conceal her situation, and when the time of the birth of the child approaches, she quietly leaves the town, hides herself in a cave, and gives birth to Abraham. He is miraculously fed by angels. He first goes to the house of his father, Terah, who is an idolater, breaks the idols, and also induces others to do likewise. He is then brought up before Nimrod, where he defies the latter's claims to be worshipped as a god, is cast into the fire, and saved by God. So that's the start of an Abrahamic legend.